welcome back to Searched Up with Sienna and part 2 of my episode on Saturday Night Live. And today I am so excited to be talking with Lindsay Shookus, the award-winning producer who worked on Saturday Night Live for over 20 years. She also produced so many of the SNL specials, was an associate producer on 30 Rock, and now runs a women's empowerment organization called Women Work Effin' Hard. Well, without further ado, here's my interview with Lindsay Shookus. I was wondering, did you watch SNL as a kid or a lot of movies and TV shows?
Yeah, I did. I watched, I don't remember watching it like when I was like before 10, but I remember it in high school. Like I distinctly remember seeing Britney Spears for the first time, watching it with my little sister who is 7 years younger than me, and being like, who is this? Like that moment of having someone introduced to me by that television show. So I mean, when I was in high school, there wasn't much. It's like if you weren't having like a sleepover with your friends, like you were kind of watching Saturday Night Live. There wasn't really much else on television back then. There was no streaming. So yeah, it was a huge part of my life as a high schooler. And it was like ingrained in like I remember just like people would do like bits that were SNL sketches walking down the hallway of high school. So it was definitely part of just kind of the everyday living as a high school student in Buffalo, New York. And I'm sure I represented probably most high school kids at that time. So yeah, it was definitely, I mean, by the way, it's not that I thought, oh, that's where I'm going to work. I never had that dream because I didn't even know you could dream that, but I definitely watched it.
Yeah. And I understand you studied journalism in college. What made you decide to come to New York City and work in television?
I left, so I went to school in North Carolina for college, and which was the best experience because it was very different than how I grew up. And
Yeah.
I think I knew that I wanted to go back up north. I didn't have it all figured out. I mean, it was the opposite of having it figured out. I basically moved to New York without a job, and I had a lot of friends who were moving here. So I had that kind of safety net of like I had a lot of friends who were
Yeah.
going to be in New York City, but I definitely didn't have a job. I definitely did. Um, I I I hadn't figured it out. And I just got really, I always say like a combination of luck and drive landed me as an assistant at SNL. I mean, I moved here and 5 weeks later I started SNL,
Oh,
which is,
wow.
you
That's
know,
crazy.
imagine pretty unusual. So I got some luck, and I also, I always tell the story of when I was an intern in college. I interned at a film publicity company. Um, and when I went back to college my senior year, I remembered my old boss's birthday and I sent her cookies. I like didn't have any
Oh my
money, so I
gosh.
couldn't send her a gift. And I remember making cookies
Oh
and
my
sending them to
God.
her. And like, the power of something as silly as like making Toll House cookies, someone feeling special. And then when I moved here, I contacted her and she helped me get the lead that landed me at SNL. So
That's crazy.
those kind of things pay off, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely,
Had I
definitely.
not done that, would I have ended up at SNL? I don't know, but
Wow.
less likely for
Yeah.
sure.
You started at SNL as Marcy Klein's assistant. How did that come about?
I love your research.
Thank you.
How did it come about? I when I went originally to interview at SNL, they were looking for one of Lorne Michaels' assistants. Like he had a bunch of assistants and they were looking for another one.
Yeah.
And by the time I got there, I think they had kind of figured out who they wanted to hire. So but they liked me. They like thought I kind of might fit in. And so they kind of did a scan of the 17th floor of like where might there be a hole? And Marcy was looking for an assistant. And so I, pretty quickly met with her and her team in the talent department. And I don't want to say I had quite a few interviews to get the job. Like I remember coming back and being like, another one. But within like, 3 or 4 weeks, I got the job. And I can distinctly remember after my first interview with Marcy, I was so nervous, or maybe my second interview. And she's like, okay, after, in an hour, I'm going to call you and let you know if you got the job. It's between you and someone else. And I was like, and I took her for her word. I was like, okay. And I went across the street to St. Pat's Cathedral. And it's the only time I ever went in the church. And I went in and I prayed that I would get the job. And then she didn't call me. So I was like, I guess I didn't get the job. But
God.
I didn't realize that, it just took more weeks. So I found out like 2 weeks later that I got the job.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And what was that like the first like couple weeks of working at SNL like for you? Like was it a huge adjustment? Was it what you were expecting at all?
I mean, it was like beyond my wildest comprehension. I mean, the good news is I like understood how to play it cool
Yeah.
and not like freak out. My friend, I joke around my first day, I met Matt Damon, and I
That's
was
great. Oh my gosh.
22 out of college, and Matt Damon walked in and held out his hand. I was like, "Hi, I'm Matt," and I remember just thinking, like, you know, what is this? So I was able to like keep it together. My outside voice really did a good job, but I couldn't believe I was there. I couldn't believe it was a job. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe that like I was going to get paid to do it. Because I didn't study film and television, and I didn't have my family didn't know anyone in show business, so I just never even thought this was an option. And so it kind of blew my mind. And the thing about SNL is that it is a lot of work. I mean, it is a
Yeah.
lot of work. It's a lot of hours. And I was working really, really long hours back then. But I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world, you
Yeah,
know?
definitely.
And everybody else around me thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So, I was a pretty lucky 22-year-old.
Yeah, definitely. And were you specifically interested in producing when you started at SNL, or were you exploring different areas of the business too, once you got comfortable being an assistant there?
I think in the beginning I was just trying to like learn as much as I could. I had always been I'd always been on stage when I was a kid. I did all the theater stuff. And I had a moment in college where I was like, oh, wait a second. There are people who are really, really good at this.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, and you're not one of them. So like, maybe don't do that. But I think I was just like an open book, and I was like, what am I gonna like pick up and learn? And
Yeah.
then soon into the job, I think I started realizing that like I had to figure out what producing was, A. And then as I started doing it, I was like, oh, this feels good to me. This
Yeah.
feels like I'm a creative problem solver. I'm good with people. I'm good at making people feel like they can do something and do it well. And now those skill sets work really well at SNL. And so I slowly started realizing that producing was a great avenue for me.
Yeah, 100%. And you were an associate producer for 30 Rock from 2008 to 2010. So how did you manage both that and SNL at the same time?
Well, I took the subway a lot back and forth, Long Island City. I got asked to work on 30 Rock by Tina and Alec Baldwin and Marcy. And I basically just like kind of came in to fill in holes where there wasn't someone doing a certain thing. I didn't have a very specific job. There was a full-time staff that was amazing over there. And
Yeah.
I would just kind of go back and forth and help where they needed. And I think I did this at SNL pretty well. And I did this at 30 Rock as well, which is I was just like a job collector. Like find things that people didn't want to do or weren't doing, and I would do them. And so I remember I got involved because Alec was on the show, Alec Baldwin, and Alec and I had a nice relationship, and he worked really well with my boss, Marcy Klein. And so those two really were like, Lindsay should help with this show, which was really nice to have that vote of confidence.
Yeah.
Then it was like, where does publicity need help? Where does photography need help? Who's throwing the events party? Who's on
Got
top of all the get, who's helping get special guests? And it kind of evolved. And I was really proud to work on that show because it was so cool. It was like
Yeah.
a show that I really loved. So yeah, again, it was combination of luck and timing and just being willing to do anything.
Yeah, definitely. I love 30 Rock too. It's so funny. I understand that your role as producer also involved casting new talent and managing the hosts. And I also heard that you traveled to Second City with Lauren Michaels to scout talent. So did you go there looking for something specific, or did you just know when you saw talent that they might be a good fit?
Every year you might be like, okay, who do we really need? Like you look at the ensemble and you're like,
Yeah.
you don't want to just have a bunch of the same voice, right?
Yeah.
That's clear. When you look at like a casting a movie or a TV show, you want people to be different. And so
Yeah.
you'd have an idea of what you're looking for, but you weren't always necessarily presented with that.
Uh-huh.
And so, people used to call me all the time, agents and managers, and they'd be like, what are you looking for this summer? What are you looking for this summer? Every summer I'd get it. And I'd always say the same thing. I was like, we're looking for funny, because it was like, I didn't want to miss out on the funniest person that existed because they weren't like the type I was looking for.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, what if Will Ferrell wasn't the type they were looking for that summer? Or
Yeah.
you don't want to pass over someone who's just spectacular. And there's a list of people that we could go through on the cast that are currently there or were there that like didn't fit what they were looking for at the moment, but were just so funny. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Kristen Wiig is a favorite of mine, and I heard that you saw the tape that she submitted. Was there something with the tape that drew your attention towards her?
Well, Kristen is just like so effortless. Kristen is just she does it so easily. Like you can't even believe like how she gets a laugh because it seems like it's like she could do it in her sleep and she probably could. When you watch these tapes, you get so many of them. You can imagine,
Yeah.
especially when I was young, when I was younger in my career there, I watched everything. So you're just by the time I was a producer, I had someone else helping me like get through them
Got
and
it. Yeah.
make better ones. But there was so many tapes. And so A, she just stood out because she was great, but then B, it was like she had an original voice. So
Yeah.
many people are the exact same, like they did the same three impressions, and it could be whatever is hot this summer. It's like there was the summer of Kim Kardashian or the Kardashians in general or Kris Jenner or there was the summer of Snooki. I don't know if you remember who like Snooki was, but like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jennifer Coolidge would be a big one from a few years ago or whoever's kind of like hot on TV. Like I can imagine like if auditions were right now, there'd be like a Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni thing that people would do. And she just like wasn't like anybody else. She just didn't do anything like other people. And she actually made me laugh, which, believe it or not, is kind of like, can be hard to do when you're watching hundreds of tapes. So it stood out right away. And it's watching Kristen, audition, get the job, and then like build her career has just been like the coolest thing. And it makes me proud. And I feel lucky to even just have been a small part of it.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. You worked very closely with Lauren Michaels. What was that like?
I mean, he's like the man, the myth, and the legend, right? He gave me the greatest opportunity of my entire life, and I learned so much from working so closely with him. One of the things I think has impacted me the most is that I learned to not necessarily just immediately take no for an answer, like try and be creative. Creative problem solving, I think I learned as a result of working for him because
Yeah.
you just had to be able to like, you just didn't want to take a no because you didn't want to have to go back to Lauren and be like, it's a no. And so you just constantly had to like figure out new ways to try and make something work.
Mhm.
And I mean, that is a skill set that will forever be useful to me.
Yeah.
And I mean, listen, he created this show that will never exist again. So it was a pretty spectacular place to learn.
I'm sure there is much chaos as I know too leading up to the show, as there's only 1 week to basically put this whole show together. How do you coach a host when, like if their nerves are starting to act up a bit? Do you have like, did you have a specific method or strategy to calm them down?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is that like I felt like so many people came in and you can imagine it's like there is no safety net, right? I want you to think about it. Like there for a lot of people it's so high pressure because you're doing it in 6 days. Some of these actors are used to prepping for a role for 6 months and you don't even know what you're doing until Wednesday night at 11 p.m. And so you really have 3 days to really be ready. And
Yeah.
each sketch you're really only rehearsing 4 or 5 times before you do it on live TV. So it is so nerve-wracking and there's so much pressure on these hosts and musical guests too. So I would try and remind them that like they were there for a reason. Like they were there because they've already earned the spot. They're not trying to prove something to get another spot. They've already done it. They've
Yeah.
proven it, and that's why they're at SNL. But I would also tell them that they had been given all the prep time they needed, which was pretty unusual for them. Usually
Yeah.
like I said, they needed months, and it's like that's the job. This isn't the job where you need 4 months.
Yeah.
This is the job is where you need 3 days, and I promise you that's all the time you need. And lastly, I think I would try and remind hosts like right before they went on, maybe at like 11 p.m. that I'd be like, these are the joy moments. Like this is the moment that will be in your life forever that you will remember. And like it's supposed to be joyful.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be this like great experience. So like figure out how to get to the joy because if you don't, it's a waste. It's a waste of a really great life moment that you might not ever get again.
Do you have a favorite episode you worked on or a host that was most memorable for you?
It's so hard for me to like I get asked all the time, you can imagine, of like favorite
Yeah.
hosts and there's truly so many. I would say that Betty White was probably the most spectacular woman to work with. She just was like so cool. Betty White was just like she was so it was she made like being funny so easy,
Yeah.
and she's so kind and she's so cool. And I remember just feeling like this is a special moment. Like it
Yeah.
was very clear to me that I was lucky to be in her presence.
Definitely.
But like I mean, there were so many hosts that I felt that way about. Like, because
Yeah.
if you think about it, I was building relationships, really intense relationships very quickly. And like when you do that quickly in a high pressure situation, you tend to like just develop like really lovely feelings for somebody. And so
Yeah.
I mean, there's a million shows that I loved, and
Yeah.
I was so proud when I got to when I got to like help someone be really great on the show. It was like the best feeling in the world.
You now lead this organization called Women Work Effing Hard with Kristen O'Keefe. What inspired that?
Kristen and I both came from like, SNL, as great as it is, it's like a pretty male dominated, field, comedy in general. And Kristen grew up on like the trading floor at banks. And I basically just was like, what if women could be as good at men as helping each other? It felt like it was kind of more bred in men to do it. And so Chris and I kind of created this. We were trying to help. It started off as like a one night deal. We were trying to help a woman grow her business, and we wanted her to meet potential clients. And then there was just like a real magic in the room of like what happens if you just try to be a little bit more intentional of like using your network and your resources and your purchasing power and your knowledge and your voice like to help women. Like what if I tell everyone about your podcast? It's like it takes 1 second and yet it's so easy to do, right? And so it's like, but it can have impact. And same thing of like, I have a friend who has a book coming out tomorrow. I'm going to shout out her book because, maybe 20 people buy it, but like that's 20 more books. And so
Yeah,
trying to
exactly.
be really, you don't have to be like the fanciest or the richest or the most connected person to like use your voice and your purchasing power intentionally. So it fills my bucket. It really, really fills my bucket to be able to like find ways to have impact with women.
Do you think you'll go back to producing TV or movies ever?
Yeah, I'm currently producing a documentary and
So
it's been a
cool.
really amazing experience and it's not announced yet, so I can't say what it is. But I've been working on it for over 2 years. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's been a real haul, but it's been really cool to learn another side of the thing and also
Yeah.
see what skills are really transferable and what's not, and also what it's like to create something in a really long time period as opposed to like I'm used to, at SNL, I was creating things in 6 days, and this is totally different,
Yeah.
like imagine how many shows I would have at SNL, it would have been 50 shows done in the time
Yeah,
that I've
that's crazy.
so it's been nice to like learn something new in that way.
Yeah. And so lastly, I have this little thing I like to do with some of my guests called rapid fire. So I basically have a few questions I'm going to ask you and just say the answer that comes most naturally to you. Don't overthink it.
Okay, great.
Perfect. So let's start with the first one. So in an interview, you said life is not linear, it's not up and to the right, and that you wish that you had known that as a teen. What is another piece of advice you would give to your 15-year-old self?
That no matter how hard you try and no matter how good you try and be, there are going to be people who don't like you. I would have loved that.
Do you have a favorite restaurant around or under 30 Rock, since I know you've spent a lot of time there?
Around 30 Rock, where do we used to go to, hold on.
Take your time, it's okay.
We used to go to this place called C4. I think that's closed now. Hold on. I would just say Latanzi because that's not total. It's close enough, but Latanzi, we would go for dinner with the host every week.
What is one thing you love about growing up in Buffalo, New York?
The Buffalo Bills. Go Bills.
And SNL has had so many incredible comedians and comedy sketches. What makes you laugh in your everyday life?
What makes me laugh? That's a great question, Sienna. I love that question. What makes me laugh? Silliness. Like, what makes me so happy is like giggling with my daughter and like dancing and like when, and being stupid and
Yeah.
acting like I did when I was like your age, like with my daughter, that makes me laugh.
And I heard any interview with you where you said remember small details. It makes people feel seen. How do you want people to see you?
You are wise beyond your years, my friend. How do I want people to see me? I want them to see me as somebody who is caring and creative and a voice for people who don't necessarily have a voice, and someone who is trying to make the world a little bit better than than how it was before. No, how would you say that? You would say, I want to be seen as somebody, yeah, who's trying to leave the world a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to thank you so, so much for doing this. I had the best time talking to you and learning about your experience throughout all these years and doing so many amazing things.
Thank you, Sienna. I appreciate it.
Of course. Have a great rest of your night.
You too. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was amazing to hear about your experience, and what you're doing with Women Work Effin' Hard is incredible. And now, before we search it up, here's 2 quick fun facts. Did you know that Saturday Night Live was originally commissioned to have just 6 episodes, and now we're on season 50? Another fun fact is that 3 sets of brothers have been cast members: John Belushi, Jim Belushi, Dan Aykroyd and Peter Aykroyd, and Bill Murray and Brian Doyle Murray. And now it's time to search it up. Let's see. Oh, Fred Armisen was a cast member on SNL and played the pastor in the movie Easy A. So, next time we'll be talking about the movie Easy A. Well, that's it for today. See you next time.